Hey, what's up? My name's Vit. Hope you're doing well. In this video, we're going to be talking about all the jobs in Final Fantasy XIV. This is going to be a bit of a long video. There's 19 jobs, and I'm going to try to speed through them as quickly as I can, but feel free to use the chapters in the video to skip around. Maybe there's a job you're interested in, so you can check that out specifically. But I'm going to be going over all of them, talking about what I like, what I dislike, and just trying to give you a general sense for what each job plays like. This is not going to be a detailed guide by any means. I do play all these jobs in a casual sense, some in a more hardcore raid sense, but I do know how all of them work. I play them all pretty comfortably, some of them less so, but we're going to be talking about all of them, just kind of highlighting what's fun about them, what's cool about them, and then we're going to be throwing them into this tier list just for fun. This is going to be my personal, very biased tier list, just rated on what I like to play to what I dislike. And your list is going to be different than mine. It's all personal preference. Any one of these jobs could be S tier. I could find a reason to put them there. They're all very balanced. They're all fun to play in their own unique ways. But what fun would that be if I put them all in S tier for the video? We gotta, make some people angry and put some things at the bottom. I will say the gap between S and D tier is very small. So just because I rank them in a certain way doesn't mean that the D tier jobs are bad by any means. And I'll try to explain that as we go. But let's not waste any more time. Let's jump right into it and start with the melees. Okay, so first job on the list is Ninja, and in my opinion, this is the most unique job in the game. It has a ton of little gimmicks that are super fun, really unique spells that act differently. It's a melee, but it plays like a ranged half of the time with all its spells. It's kind of a combination between melee, ranged, caster, but a lot of the time you're in melee ranged, a lot of your burst, you can be at range and, still keep hitting the boss. You can be out on the side of the arena throwing out the highest potency spells in the game. And it's just really fun. It's got a base 10% move speed increase, so it's literally the fastest job in the game just running around in and out of combat. It's got a unique little jump animation where you do a fun little front flip. It's got the Mudra system where you have to do a combination of Tenchi Jin to get different abilities, different spells. So you've got a haste buff where you can, just do your spells faster, your abilities faster. It's just a really solid combination. You can reset those cooldowns when you hide outside of combat, so you can go invisible. This is kind of fun. If you're just out in the world, you can do this as well. But the rotation is really busy, but it's not so bad outside of the burst window, so you do have time to chill. The opener and the bursts are very tight, but it's still flexible, and you have range. You can kind of move things around. And once you learn it, there's a really nice flow to it. There is a bit of a learning curve to Ninja, but once you get it, it's really not so bad. It's very repeatable and flexible throughout different fights. Lots of flashy spell effects. Lots of fun stuff you can do. You get fun things like the frog. You saw a bunch of the burst there. You get cool AoE effects like Doton, where you can place this down, and the tank, you have to rely on the tank to place mobs within this, which can be interesting at times, but you do a lot of damage. This job has the single highest damage ability in the game with Hyosho, and when you put this under buffs, you will see the highest numbers for any attack in the game, so that's cool if that's what you're into. This is one of my favorite jobs. I started the game on Dragoon, but also leveled Ninja, both of them through the MSQ, and this is an easy S tier job for me. So right off the bat, we're putting that at the top of the list. I think this is one of the best designed jobs in the entire game. Highly recommend it. Definitely give it a shot. It also starts at level 1, so you can't pick it from the very start of the game when you're creating your character, but if you start in Limsa, you can go grab it right off the bat. And I think the leveling experience for Ninja is also really good. It's interesting throughout the levels. A lot of the other jobs might come alive later on in the game, but Ninja is always interesting from the start, in my opinion. Much more so than some of the other melee jobs and the other DPS jobs as well. It's always fun, it's always consistent, and it's just a solid S tier pick. Okay, next up we have Monk, and this is a bit of an interesting one. I don't have a ton of playtime on Monk, but I recognize that it's an incredible job. It is the most melee of the melee jobs. If you like punching and kicking, this is the job for you. Monk has an interesting rotation where you have a 3 GCD combo, and you mix and match between your 6 different buttons to achieve that combo. You have a damage buff for yourself, as well as a dot, damage over time, to put on the enemy. And you kind of have to juggle these because they have different timers, they get applied at different times, and keeping track of both of them gets a little confusing, but it's not so bad once you get the feel for it. You've got good party buff, good personal buffs. Perfect balance lets you build your gauge in different ways by doing those different combos, and you get a big finisher move at the end. So the different order that you do those in, you get different finishers, and it's just a really solid job overall. I already forgot to press some buttons because I'm focused on talking here, but we'll just run through some buttons so you can get a feel for what it looks like. The opener is not too busy or anything. This job feels maybe a little more consistent than some other jobs in how busy it is throughout the rotation. It's kind of like you're just constantly thinking about what's going on. Like I said, I'm already screwing up really bad here, so don't take my gameplay as perfect representation of it. But yeah, it's just a fun job. It does take a lot of brain power. I personally find this to be one of the tougher jobs, just because of all those timers you have to keep track of throughout the rotation. But I'm sure if I played it more, it would feel a lot more natural. The positionals on Monk are not too bad. You only have 2 of them, 1 flank and 1 rear, so there's not much to keep track of there. But you do get some fun skills. The burst is coming up here again, so I will just show you that when we get Phantom Rush, which is your hardest hitting ability. So you fill your gauge, you get Phantom Rush. That's fun. You do have some fun other abilities like Six-Sided Star, which is like a good disengage tool. Good for if you have to LB, you can press that just because it has a long cooldown, almost 4 seconds. You've got things like Mantra, which buff healing for the party. And yeah, just a very solid melee. Not one that I play a whole lot, but I think I will give Monk a solid A tier because it's just a very solid job. I don't find it quite as fun as Ninja, but it's a great pick. Okay, next up on the list is Samurai. This one's a bit interesting because Samurai has a bunch of cast times on some of their big hits. It actually has more casts per minute than Summoner, which is a little funny. They're neck and neck. Summoner isn't much less, or yeah, Summoner's not much less, but Samurai does have a lot of casting, so you have to plant, get those casts out, and it can be a little bit awkward as a melee. You're always in melee range when you're casting. They do have a good bit of range on them, but even so, it can get you into trouble if you're not careful. It's not too bad, but the rotation does flow smoothly. Your main goal is to execute your 3 different GCD combos to fill out these stickers on your job gauge, and you can cash those out for different abilities. So I'll just run through the rotation real quick, and you can get a look at kind of how this job plays. Samurai's really not too bad. Like I said, the rotation is smooth, it flows into itself and rotates nicely. But you do have to plant for those big cast times. They're not particularly long casts, but you do have to kind of plan around them sometimes. But overall, this is one of the most damaging jobs in the game, right behind Black Mage at this point, so second most damage in the game currently. But I feel that Samurai is significantly easier to play than Black Mage, so it's easier to pick up, do lots of damage on this job compared to Black Mage. Even compared to some of the other melees, I think Samurai is a great place to learn. However, it does start at a slightly higher level than some of the other jobs, so not a job you can play right off the bat, but it is a great choice. It's just not my favorite due to a lot of those cast times. So for me personally, I'm going to put it in B tier just for that. It also doesn't bring any buffs or utility to the table when it comes to your party, so it's a very selfish DPS job. And if you don't have the right party comp, it can kind of suffer a little bit. That's not super important, especially early on, but in high-end rating, it can matter sometimes. Still a great pick, and Samurai's fun, so just because I put it a little lower doesn't mean it's bad, so give it a shot. Next up for the melees, we have Reaper, and this is a bit of an interesting one for me. It starts at level 70, so it's a later job, but it really doesn't feel complete at all until you get to level 90. It's incredibly slow going for those earlier levels, and even at level 90, it is by far the most simple of the melees. In my opinion, it just doesn't have a whole lot going on. You basically put up your damage debuff on the enemy, and then do your rotation. You get some big hits, but a lot of the time the basic combo is pretty simple. There's no positionals on it. The only positionals are on Gallows and Gibbet, which are your gauge spenders, and you can basically just true north those. So you get free positionals on this job a lot. So if you don't like positionals, Reaper's a great job. If you're new to melee, Reaper is definitely easier to pick up and play. And if you're just trying to focus on learning mechanics or something, Reaper's a great pick. It does a ton of damage for the amount of effort that you have to put in, which is great for new players. Great for anybody, really. You can really just pick up and play this job. There is a bit to learn for sure, as with anything, but you get your Enshroud for the burst window. You have a cast on Communio, your biggest hit, but it's nowhere near as many casts as Samurai. It's usually only 1 or 2 per minute. You just got to remember to keep up that damage vulnerability debuff on the enemy. You can apply that once or twice. You have these occasional positionals, but otherwise you're just kind of building gauge, waiting for your Enshroud window, and spending that whenever you see fit. Usually once on the minute mark and twice during the 2-minute buffs. You can hold gauge for that. There's some optimization to do on Reaper for sure, but I don't know. To me, it just feels like it's missing something compared to the other 2 melee, or the other 4 melee, sorry. Yeah, I don't know. Reaper is just a little slow-paced for me. It's a great job, does a lot of damage. It's great to learn fights on. Very solid pick if you are new to melee. I just have more fun on the other jobs. So for me, Reaper is going to go down in C tier. I already put it on the list. So I don't know. You might like it. I'm not a huge fan of the aesthetic, but you might be, and it's a great job. So don't be afraid to try it. Okay, we're already at the last of the melee jobs, and that would be Dragoon. This is my favorite job in the game. It's the job that I started the game on. Started as a Lancer way back when, and it's probably the job I play most frequently, so no surprise that I'll probably be putting this near the top of the list. Dragoon is just a really nice, stylish, flowy job in my opinion. The rotation is nice and smooth. It does have a very long combo, long GCD combo that loops, and you have to kind of juggle between 2 different sides of that combo. There's your dot, and then there's your harder hitting one. But it all flows continuously, and you've got all your jumps to put out. You don't get your biggest hits until about the 1-minute mark, so Dragoon does take a little bit to ramp up in the fights currently. I think this is something that they may be reworking with the changes coming in Dawntrail. So we'll see what comes of it. I'm not too worried about it because I'm confident that they will keep this job fun and interesting moving forward with the rework. I think they're just going to fix some of its little problems, like not having your full burst in the opener. It's really not a problem because it's balanced around that currently, but It does have the most positionals in the game for any of the melee. It's really not too bad. They're smooth and intuitive once you get enough practice in, as with anything really. But here we're coming up on the 1 minute burst, so you will see big hit Star Diver. Really fun jumps, big flashy animations. Dragoon's just good fun. It's clean, it's smooth, the rotation feels fluid. It does have a lot of buttons to weave, but once you get used to it, once you get the hang of it, in my opinion, it's one of the most fun jobs. It's great on multi-target, on dungeon packs. It has huge AoE potential, and it also has a big backflip, which you can use for movement. You can angle your character backwards and backflip to get to safe spots, or you can backflip off the arena into the death wall, and it's not a matter of when that will it's not a matter of if that will happen, it's a matter of when. You're definitely going to kill yourself with that backflip at some point on Dragoon, and it's funny, and there's always a new innovative way that you will find to do so. So, I don't know, Dragoon is just really awesome in my opinion. I love the vibe of it. Yeah, Dragoon is just easy S tier for me. Dragoon and Ninja are my two favorite jobs in the game right now. It's what I play in all the hard content. Currently progging DSR Ultimate on Dragoon, and it's been a blast. I've done raid tiers on Dragoon and Ninja. Did top on Ninja. Both of those jobs are just very good fun. Okay, we've made it to the Fizz ranged jobs. We're going to start with Machinist, and similar to Samurai, Machinist is a selfish DPS job, meaning that it has no buffs. It does have some good party utility in the form of 2 different mitigations. Dismantle's a really nice one that's different from the other Fizz ranged, but all the Fizz ranged have their general party mit, 10%. But again, no buffs on Machinist. Machinist is just focused around doing damage, and it's a Fizz ranged, so you have freedom of movement as you're doing your rotation, which is really cool. Fizz ranged get Paladin outside of combat, which is always nice. The rotation's pretty straightforward. It's nice and static compared to some of the other Fizz ranged, which can be a little more RNG heavy or proc based. Whereas Machinist, you can really just rely on your rotation to be consistent throughout the fights, throughout the burst phases. You've got a bunch of fun abilities like Drill, Air Anchor, Chainsaw. You've got your giant robot that you can call out to fight for you. And like I was saying, you can just run around, do damage, and it's funny because Machinist sometimes out-damages some of the melee jobs currently in some content, if played well. Machinist is just one of those jobs that you can kind of get away with just pushing all your buttons and hoping for the best, and you'll still just do reliably good damage. Obviously you want to learn your rotation well, but it's an easy job to pick up and play. Starts at level 30 in Heavensward, I believe. And yeah, I don't know. It's just, I recommend it. It's not my favorite of the Fizz ranged. I do think there are more interesting options out there. But it's a very solid pick. If you like robots and guns, this is the Fizz ranged for you. So we'll let the robot keep fighting there as we pull up the tier list. For me, Machinist is going in A tier. Very solid pick. Always good to have him on the team. Okay, next for the Fizz ranged would be Bard. Bard's kind of your typical bow and arrow class, but with a slight spin on it in that you're also a bard playing music. You have its main gimmick are these songs that you get to play. These provide buffs to your party constantly throughout the fight and also give you some specific effects. So you have to rotate through these. You also have 2 dots that you have to apply. A lot of people complain about the dot and song upkeep on Bard, but if you're just learning, an easy way to do it is whenever you play a song, you can refresh your dots. They both have a 45-second timer on it, so as long as you're refreshing your dots, you can refresh both by just pressing one button, Iron Jaws. So just press that button whenever you're playing a song, your dots will never fall off, and just by doing this, you can pretty easily be a top 10% Bard player. This job's not rocket science, but a lot of people think they think of it as more difficult than it really is for some reason. A lot of the time you're just pressing one button over and over again, waiting for procs to come up. Your songs give you slightly different effects as you rotate through them, but I don't know. I think this is one of the more fun phys ranged jobs in my opinion. It's my favorite one. I don't know. There's something about just playing those songs, keeping your dots up, and I really just like a lot of the flashy spell effects. I like the musical side of things on Bard as well. When you're out of combat, out in the overworld, you can actually just play instruments in the game, which is kind of fun. It's very gimmicky as somebody who plays instruments in real life. These ones with the delay of the game are almost impossible to play, but you know, it's something fun that you can do outside of just playing the job. If you like bow and arrow, Bard's a really great pick. It brings a lot of useful buffs and utility to the table. It does a good amount of damage. It's definitely more buff focused than Machinist. Machinist does a lot more raw damage, of course, but between the dots, you can two-target really well. You have an Asuna, so you can cleanse debuffs on yourself or party members. Similar to Monk, there's also a healing buff for your party. And again, just that mitigation for your party, just like the other phys ranged. But I don't know, Bard just brings a lot of good utility. It is my favorite of the phys ranged, so for me personally, it's the phys ranged I play. I'm putting this in S tier. That might be a hot take. People might not like this job. I know a lot of people don't like the songs and the debuffs, but I think it's not too bad. Give Bard a shot. It's one of the busier phys ranged, along with Machinist. I think Machinist might be a little more busy than Bard, but both of them are up there. Lastly, we have Dancer. We'll get to that shortly, but that's not quite as busy, so take your pick. Bard's fun. If you like the aesthetic, it's a good pick. Next up, we've got Dancer, the last of the phys ranged, and this is a bit of an interesting one. Dancer is definitely a more RNG heavy job. There's a bit of randomization that goes on with your dances, with some of your gauge procking. It also relies on having a dance partner, so you can give dance partner to a party member, typically the strongest DPS. Whoever's doing most damage is typically the optimal dance partner. There's some priorities with that, but I won't get into that. And then you kind of rely on them to do a lot of damage to proc your abilities as well as giving them buffs. So Dancer's kind of in a weird spot where you need a party member who is playing very well to get the most out of Dancer. It's a really good job. Some of the dances are unique and interesting. You basically play DDR with a random set of buttons until you are ready to dance, and then you press that. Same goes for your buff. You have to press a random 4 buttons to get your buff out. Dancer is fun. It's the most simple of the phys ranged, in my opinion. And again, it is reliant on a party member to maximize your damage, so that can be a pro or a con. If you've got a really solid samurai or a ninja in the party, or maybe even a black mage, Dancer can really push them forward a lot and have them pump out some serious damage. But for me, I'm not a big fan of relying on other people to play my job to its fullest potential. That's a problem with some of the buff jobs in this game. It's not a big problem. Obviously, you'll still get full enjoyment out of playing the job, doing the rotation. That stuff doesn't change, but just the damage that you do, the outcome might change a bit depending on who you're giving your buffs to. So reaching that high potential on Dancer relies on that. It also relies on these feathers on your job gauge. These have a chance to proc as you go, as your dance partner goes. And you want to save those up for your 2-minute burst. So there's a chance that you just don't have enough of them going into your burst, and you don't get to do your full damage that you could potentially be doing. yeah, I don't know. Dancer's really just not for me personally, but I do see the appeal of it. Obviously, the aesthetic is nice and flashy. The dances are fun, but I just personally like the other Fizz ranged more. You do have some other fun effects like on Avant. I haven't talked about some of the movement skills. Ninja has a slightly better one in my opinion, where you can instantly teleport with Shikuchi. Monk also has a really good one where you can zip around the arena. Thunderclap lets you target party members or enemies and instantly dash to them. Dancer is just a straight line. You do get 3 charges of it, but to me it feels a little more delayed than some of the other gap closers or teleports in the game. And as a Fizz ranged, it's not quite as valuable in my opinion. So, I don't know. Dancer's in a strange spot for me, but that's just me. You might love this job. It's flashy. It's pretty. Not a bad option by any means. So, for me, with the tier list, I think I'm going to throw it a little lower. B tier, solid pick. Does bring big buffs, big utility, but a lot of those proc systems, the dances, just aren't for me personally. Alright, next up we have Summoner, the first of the casters we're going to talk about, and this one's kind of interesting because it's the easiest job in the game, in my opinion. Summoner is very straightforward, the rotation's simple, it's easy to learn, which is a good thing. Depending on what you're looking for, Summoner can be very easy to learn fights on, very easy to pump out damage on. If you're new to the game, leveling Summoner also levels Scholar at the same time, so you get a DPS and a healer for the price of one, meaning the XP carries over for both jobs. You level either one and the other levels in tandem with it. But basically you just cycle through all your different summons here. These are the same summons that we've been seeing in Final Fantasy forever. Ifrit, Garuda Titan, Bahamut Phoenix. I think in Dawntrail they should definitely be giving us maybe another set of 3 summons. That would be really nice if we maybe got Alexander, Shiva, Leviathan, Ramu. I don't know. As it stands currently, I think Summoner is just lacking a little something. It could use some extra buttons somewhere. Some extra summons maybe, but it does great damage. It's got a heal over time when you're in Phoenix mode. There are very few cast times, like I was saying before. Summoner has about the same amount of casts as Samurai every minute, so it's really not a hard job to play. You got a lot of freedom of movement, you can run around, cast all your summons. There are a few slow casts during Garuda and Ifrit, so you can choose which summons to summon in what order, based on what fight you're in. If you need to move, you can summon Garuda or Titan. If you're able to plant, you can summon Ifrit. So there's a little bit of optimization to do, not a whole lot. Bahamut is your hardest hit. You also have a gap closer in Phoenix, or in Ifrit, I should say. So yeah, I don't know. This job's not for me personally. I get a lot more enjoyment out of the other 2 casters. But there's definitely something to be said for the simplicity of this job. You can pick it up and do very reliable damage right off the bat. Summoner is a great job to start with. At the lower levels, it is one of the highest damaged jobs in the game, like in the level 70 ultimates, for example. Summoner is just completely broken with how much damage it does. I don't think they balanced it at all for the lower levels. So it can be fun early on for sure. The leveling experience is good, especially getting 2 jobs. Another downside is that your weapon is just a book, when you could be playing this game with a big greatsword or whatever else. There are some cool books in the game, like this one that's see-through on one side and not on the other. Some of them have some cool effects on them, but I don't know. I just prefer a big sword or something, but that's just me. All that being said, for me personally, Summoner's going in D tier. It's just too simple. It doesn't have enough going on. It doesn't even feel like a caster half the time. It kind of just feels like a fizz ranged. When you have more casts on a melee than a caster, it's just, I don't know, something about it feels off. It needs something. So we'll see how it goes in Dawntrail. It's still a great job. The thing with this tier list, it's my personal, very biased tier list. I like busy, complicated jobs. If you're looking for an easy to play job, if you're just looking to clear fights, flip this list upside down. Summoner could very easily be S tier for you, if that's what you're looking for. So take this list with a grain of salt. Don't take it too seriously. If you want an easy to play job, Summoner's great. If you want to turn your brain off, Summoner, Reaper, Dancer, you know, it is what it is. So Summoner's at the bottom for me personally. Maybe you can yell at me in the comments, tell me I'm wrong, but that's where it's going to be on my list. All right, next up for the casters is Red Mage. Now this is one of my favorite jobs in the game, and its main gimmick has to do with its dual cast system. So whenever you cast a spell, your next cast is instant. So you have these short spells with a 2-second cast time or thereabout, and then you have these long spells with a 5-second cast time. So you never really want to be hard casting these long ones. You always go from a short one into a long one because they're instant. Same goes for things like Res. Your Verrays, you can, you know, dual cast that. You can dual cast heals. It's just really fun. Red Mage also has its melee combo, where this job kind of works opposite to that of Ninja, where Ninja is typically melee, and then some of their burst abilities are more ranged. Some of their big hits are ranged, whereas Red Mage, a lot of its normal moves are out casting spells outside of the burst, and then you go in for your melee combo during burst. So a lot of the time you're just going to be out here casting spells at range. Again, with that dual cast, you have a lot of movement on those instant cast windows, so you can really move around well. There are a lot of casts on this job, which I like, compared to Summoner, where Summoner, it doesn't really feel like you're casting a whole bunch. Doesn't really feel like you're a true caster, more of a fizz ranged sometimes. But Red Mage really does feel like a true caster when you're just building up those different black and white mana gauges. Whenever you have 50, you can go in for a melee combo to cash out that gauge. You kind of want to be building that up for your bursts on the 2-minute window. You've got some really good party utility in the form of Magic Barrier. That is an extra mitigation that the other casters do not have. You've got a party buff, you've got a personal buff. Red Mage just has a whole lot going on. It is one of the most unique gameplay styles in all of 14. We're kind of just building up here again for the next 2-minute burst. I don't know what else there is to say about this job. It just plays super well. The gauge management is fun, the movement is fun, the melee combo is fun. It doesn't do quite as much damage as Black Mage, for example. It's about on par with Summoner, but it's definitely not the highest damaging caster, but in my opinion, it's possibly the most fun of all three of them. It's definitely the most stylish, in my opinion. Red Mage just has so much fun stuff that you can do with it. Here we're going to get a double melee combo under our buffs. So this is something you can do. Get multiple melee combos. Here we're actually going to get a triple melee combo. You can be flashy with your backflip when you want to. Just be careful not to go off the arena. Just like Dragoon, that's something that will definitely kill you more than once. Luckily, there is an option. You can either backflip or you can stay in place. So you can still press that button. Just choose whether or not to backflip. Yeah, and that's really all there is to Summoner. Having access to infinite raises, heals on command as well. You can kind of save some runs more so than the other casters, especially more so than Black Mage. Summoner has a raise, but it's not as accessible as Red Mage's. And I don't know, this is just one of my favorite jobs. It's an easy S tier for me with how fun and flashy it is. Okay, and last but certainly not least for all of the casters is Black Mage. This is currently the highest damaging job in the entire game over Samurai. It's also the hardest job to play in my opinion. Black Mage is the only job where your party will kind of understand when you are just dying repeatedly. Black Mage either goes one of two ways. You're either top damage or you're just really struggling and wishing that you were on a different job. It's got the highest skill ceiling by far. There's so much technical stuff you can do with the rotation on this job. I usually just play the standard rotation, but there's all sorts of non-standard stuff that you can do with transpose. The main goal is to be in fire, spending your mana, and then you go to ice to regen mana. The rotation itself is pretty straightforward. I'm probably going to screw it up as I sit here trying to explain it all, but there's just lots of big explosions. You have ley lines, which you can place down on the floor and teleport to party members, teleport back to your ley lines. Just a really fun job overall. You do big damage, pump out big explosions. You do have a dot to upkeep. Regen mana in ice mode. Like I said, the rotation's straightforward enough, but it really takes a lot of planning and practice. You really have to learn the fights to know when you can plant, when you can move. You have triple cast, which gives you 3 back-to-back instant casts. I already screwed up my rotation somehow talking, but it is what it is. This job is tough, but once you master it, it is possibly the most satisfying job in the game to play. Yeah, I don't know. There's just something about being in the right place at the right time, being able to plant and cast your spells where you need to, and once you do so correctly, you just know that you are doing insane damage on this job. There's a near limitless skill expression to this job where you can just learn new ways to do things. There's always a new way to do fights. You have to learn the fights. It's one of the only jobs in this game that still has different builds with the gearing. You can use spell speed to cast faster, or you can go for crit just to ensure more damage with a slightly longer cast time. So I don't know, Black Mage is just really fun in general. It's fun pressing Fire 4 over and over again. You're just a turret standing here pumping out damage, and yeah, it's just one of those classic jobs in this game where when you pull it off right, it just feels good. So for me, I don't play this job enough. I need to play it more, but it is S tier. The leveling experience is horrible. Your rotation changes every 10 levels, but I don't know. Once you hit endgame, that keeps things interesting. I guess you can go play a different job if you queue into level 80, 70, 60 content. But at endgame, it feels really perfect. So I don't know. That's an S tier job for me. Okay, we've made it to the tanks, and right off the bat, we're going to get into Warrior. And this might be another hot take, but Warrior is probably my least favorite of the tanks. I know a lot of people love this job. Its whole job identity is just getting really angry and smacking things with an axe. And it does so well. If that's your thing, then by all means. Fellcleave, pressing Fellcleave back to back over and over again. Feels good. There's nothing wrong with it. You do get Primal Rend, the big monkey foot. You get 3 gap closers, which are always fun to have. You can kind of zip around more so than the other tanks. You've got some really good healing abilities, some good mitigation, shields for the party with Shake It Off. Thrill of Battle gives you more HP. It's definitely, in my opinion, the most simple of the tanks, but with that simplicity comes ease of use. So, like I said with Summoner, that can definitely be a good thing. If you're just trying to learn how to tank, this is one of the tanks that starts at level 1 alongside Paladin. So you really can't go wrong with Warrior. It also has the shortest cooldown on its invuln out of all of the tanks in the game, which even at endgame you will find to be super useful, being able to invuln more frequently than the other tanks. Its burst is consistent. It's just gauge based, so you save up a bit of gauge for your burst without overcapping. You have an instant heal with Equilibrium, so you can heal yourself on command. You can heal party members. There's Bloodwetting, which heals yourself when you do damage. This is insane for dungeons. If you use that in an AoE pull, you just see so much healing coming off of every hit you do that you basically don't need a healer in dungeons. But yeah, Warrior is just pretty straightforward. You really can't go wrong with this tank. It's got great healing, great damage. It's just not my favorite. I think the other tanks are more fun, so I'm going to rank it on the list accordingly. I'm going to put it in C tier, just because the other tanks are going to be spread out across the other tiers. But it's by no means a bad tank. It could easily be an S tier. If you like how it looks, how it plays, by all means. It's a great tank to play. It's always good to have one in the party. And next up for the tank, we have Paladin, the classic sword and shield, knight in shining armor. This is another one of the tanks that you can start at from level 1. Start with from level 1. So this job plays similarly to Warrior, not entirely. You've got a damage buff, you've got some ranged abilities, you've got a lot of interesting mitt. Passage of Arms is a cool one that you can put up and your party can hide behind you and you mitigate whoever's in these wings. That's fun. Divine Veil is a big party shield. You've got some interesting stuff like that. Your invuln makes you completely impervious to damage, but it also has the longest 7-minute cooldown in the game, so you don't get to use it as frequently as Warriors, for example. But the big highlight for Paladin, in my opinion, is all of its ranged attacks. Its main burst, you can hit your entire Confiteor combo, all of these big sword attacks, all out here from range. You can hit your Holy Spirits from range. You've got your gap closers. You only have 2 of them as opposed to Warrior with 3. But yeah, the rotation's pretty straightforward. It's nice and simple as well. You really can't go wrong with Paladin. Those ranged attacks really come in handy sometimes if you're ever stuck out disengaging from the boss. You get an instant cast after your 1-2-3 combo, but you can always slow cast it. Another thing to note on Paladin is that you also have Clemency, which is an on-demand heal. So there may be some instances where maybe your healer dies in a dungeon and you're fighting a boss and you need to heal your party members. You can do so on Paladin, whereas on other tanks it can be a little bit more difficult. Even Warrior, which has really good self-healing, I find that it can be harder to heal party members on Warrior. But obviously, both do a good job with that. If you heal too much, obviously you're going to run into MP management problems like I am right now. Just showing this off. I just spammed Clemency though, so that is almost never an issue for you. But yeah, the burst is fun. The range is really useful. You also have Cover, which is an ability that you can give to a party member. It's very situational, not super useful, but if you put cover on a party member, you take all of the damage that they would take. So you can make some saves, make some plays with that. Feels really good when you do so, but again, it's super situational. Paladin's just a good tank overall. Again, it's got the longest invuln, so that can be a little more situational as well. But overall, super well-rounded, does really good damage. All the tanks do about the same damage. The tanks are all very balanced. And in my opinion, it's very easy to switch between the tanks. So if you play one tank, pick up another, give it a shot. For me though, Paladin is a little more fun than Warrior with some of its ranged spells and just flashier spell effects. So I'm going to put it in B tier. It's a good middle ground, good average tank. So I have fun playing it, but there are 2 tanks, in my opinion, that I like more. So we'll get to those in a sec. Next up on our list for the tanks, we have Gunbreaker. And this is an interesting one because, in my opinion, it's a little bit more DPS focused for a tank. It's just got a more complex DPS rotation in that when you're doing your 1-2-3 combo, you build up these cartridges for your gunblade. I can't talk. And then you use those, you spend them to use your big flashy gunblade abilities. So you have more to weave on this job than the other tanks, at least the other two that I've already talked about, which can be a bit tedious when you're having to move and pull the boss, or when you're having to weave all of your mitigation in for a tank buster. You have to tank swap and you've got to do a bunch of damage spells at the same time. It can get difficult, it can be a lot, but I don't know. I find that this rotation is just a bit more engaging than the last two tanks. I'm a DPS main, so having that more interesting rotation is, you know, more appealing to me. But if you're learning to tank, this one you might find is just a little bit more cumbersome than the others. Gunbreaker is really flashy. It's got lots of cool explosive gunblade effects. A lot of the weapons and outfits are really sleek, cool. Your invuln on this job is really interesting. It takes you down to 1 HP, but when you do so, you are invulnerable for the next 10 seconds. You can kind of heal yourself up a bit, but obviously that is on the healer to top you off. You've got a shield that heals you a bit when you drop below 50% HP. You've got all the other MIT that the tanks have. And yeah, Gunbreaker is just a really solid pick if you want a busier damage rotation on your tank. It starts at level 60, I believe. So you really can't start on this tank anyway, but I don't think I would recommend it as a first tank. The others are a better option for sure as you're learning the fundamentals of tanking. But Gunbreaker is just super fun once you kind of know what you're doing. I'm no expert in tanking, but I like to play Gunbreaker a lot, and I'm going to put that in A tier. Again, I'm a DPS. I like busy rotations, so the more DPS-focused tanks, for me, are more appealing. Well, you'll see that with Dark Knight as well, but Gunbreaker is A tier for me. If you want a more simple, easier to tank, then Warrior and Paladin are definitely better options, though. Okay, lastly for the tanks, we've got Dark Knight. Now, this is possibly the squishiest, least tanky tank of all of them. It has to manage MP. It doesn't really heal itself at all, or very well. It's got the busiest rotation by far, but you get a really cool greatsword, so it's automatically my favorite tank. You get a lot of cool, edgy spell effects. You've got a whole bunch of stuff that you need to weave, but despite being one of the busier jobs, I really don't find it to be too complex. It's basically just make sure you don't overcap on mana or your gauge. Press all your buttons, and you'll be doing a lot of damage. It is definitely more effort to do damage on Dark Knight than the other tanks. But again, they're all balanced really well at this point. They all do about the same damage, roughly. But Dark Knight is a little more engaging, in my opinion, with some of its damage, as well as the mitigation, as well as the invuln. You have a button called TBN, or the Blackest Night, which lets you put a shield on yourself or a party member, and when it breaks, it kind of refunds you the mana that it costs. So Dark Knight's the only one with a mana cost associated with one of its main mitigations. So make sure to save some mana or you might be screwed. But again, you get that mana refunded and get to use it for damage if that shield breaks. You've also got Living Dead, which is your invuln, which is pretty interesting. It's way more interesting than the other tank invulns, for better or worse. Basically, when you reach 0 HP when this is active, it gives you the Walking Dead status effect, which makes you completely invuln, and your GCDs kind of get a lifesteal effect, and you need to be healed to full or else you'll actually die after that wears off. So it's definitely the trickiest invuln to use, but again, it's just one more thing that makes Dark Knight super interactive. Sometimes you're going to want a tank that requires less thinking than Dark Knight does. But again, for me, that more involved DPS rotation, the MP management, The busyness of it, it all just really adds up to a fun to play tank. I really love the aesthetic of it. Obviously, the big greatsword makes it S tier. The tanks are kind of ranked separately from the other jobs. You can kind of look at this list as DPS, tanks, and healers all separate. Like, I don't know that Gunbreaker is the same as Monk, for example, you know. So look at them as separate roles, but Dark Knight is my favorite tank. I totally understand if it's not yours. And again, S tier and C tier are incredibly close together. I'm just kind of doing this for the video to show it's my favorite, but by no means is C tier a bad tank. By no means is S tier the best tank. They are all excellent tanks. Play whichever one you like the look of, but I like Dark Knight, so it is what it is. Okay, and just like that, we've made it to the healers. Healing is definitely the one role that I am least familiar with. I've done it all at a casual level. I haven't done a lot of raiding on healer. It's something I'd like to do moving forward, but I know enough about these jobs, and I've raided with enough healers that I kind of know how it all works. But if I screw anything up, just bear with me on the healers. So we'll jump in with White Mage. It's the only healer you can start the game with if you're new. It's the easiest to just pump out heals on. It is absolutely the king of pure healing. White Mage is very straightforward in that your damage abilities are you're just going to be glaring over and over again, and when you need to heal, you have heal over times, you have instant heals. You have really nice spell effects with things like Temperance, which is a big mitigation, and increased healing potency. You can put down your bell, which pulses out healing when damage comes in. It's hard to show that without, you know, being in an actual fight, but that will heal on its own when damage comes in, and then when it times out or when you press the button again, it explodes for big healing. Like I said, you've got big heals over time. You've got a size, which is a big AoE heal plus damage. You often want to be using that for damage. You've got your big bubble heal, which is a heal over time for anybody in it. You've got some shields, some mitigation for personals. You can throw a shield on the tank when the tank buster's coming in. Got Presence of Mind, which speeds up your cast time during burst. And you've got Benediction, which is just a full single target heal. Really good for tank invulns or, you know, if somebody is in an emergency. So White Mage also has the Lily gauge, where you get your Lily heals, single target or party-wide. And after you use 3 of these, you get your biggest damage ability with Afflatus Misery. And this is a massive 1240 potency attack. So you can put that under buffs, and White Mage just does massive damage with this and its other casts. So White Mage is a really solid pick overall. It's just reliable. It's easy to heal with. You really can't go wrong. You don't have a ton of mitigation. It's simple, it's easy, and as you know, with my current tier list, you'll kind of get an idea for where that places it. In my opinion, White Mage is just maybe a little bit on the boring side, maybe a hot take, but I'm going to put it in C tier. Again, I'm not a big healer, so take this with a grain of salt. But for me, I find the other healers to be more fun to play. But if you're new to healing, if you're just looking to clear maybe a savage or extreme fight for the first time, White Mage is just such a solid pick because you can really carry the healing. And it's easy to do so. So White Mage is arguably the best healer with just how straightforward it is and, you know, easy to play. So it's a great healer, just not my favorite. So up next for the other pure healer is Astro or Astrologian. This job is in a really interesting place. It is getting a rework in Dawntrail, and we don't really know what that consists of yet, so we'll see. But as of right now, it's a really solid healer. It is by far the hardest healer to play. You have so many buffs to manage, and you have a lot of different timed healing spells. So you have to know when to put things out at certain times. But it also has some of the flashiest spell effects, some of the prettiest effects in the entire game that make it worth playing on their own. A lot of the damage spells are similar to White Mage, but you do have a few extra options. You have a targeted AoE as opposed to White Mage's Holy. I don't think I talked about that, but Holy on White Mage is a little more simple to use. But Astro also has its whole card system where you draw cards and give them to party members. You have melee cards and you have ranged cards, and you have to give them to the correct party member during buffs, during burst. And it can be a little tricky to weave all of those cards in. Astro is one of the busiest jobs in the game. That'll give you an idea of what I think about it. I love Astro, but it also has just some of the strongest buffs in the game. However, Astro is also very RNG heavy. Between the cards, as well as what I just played, Lord of Crowns, this minor arcana, this is kind of like a coin flip. You either get a heal or you get damage, so you never really know what you're going to get out of that. You never know what you're going to get out of your cards. You have a personal buff with Astrodyne where you have to play 3 different cards, and they all have to have this different seal on them. Either the moon, the full moon, the crescent moon, or the sun. And like you see, I just don't have a sun, so you need all 3 to have a full power personal buff. So that's kind of a little frustrating RNG element of this job. But Astro has a lot of mitigation as well as heals, so Astro can do a really good job with just carrying the healing in a group. It can solo heal things. It's just super powerful overall. But again, a lot of these heals are much harder to use than on White Mage, so it's kind of a toss-up. I wouldn't say Astro is necessarily more powerful. It has more mitigation for sure. It has stronger buffs, but it does less personal damage, so it's really a toss-up between the two. I think it's worth playing for the spell effects alone, but you'll definitely feel the added difficulty with Astro. For me personally, I don't play any of the healers enough to think about it too hard, but I think it is the most engaging healer to play, and I'm putting it in S tier. If I ever raid on healer, I would prefer to do so on Astro. There's just a higher chance of it keeping me awake for a long period of time than White Mage. I don't know. White Mage is great. Astro is great. There's definitely more to learn with Astro. Bigger learning curve for sure. So I don't know. This fits my grading criteria so far, my bias. But if you want a simple healer, play White Mage. If you want to be juggling cards and buffs and shields and heals and timed heals and damage, then play Astro. It's definitely got a lot more going on, but it's a lot more fun to learn it all too. Okay, so next on our list for the healers, we're getting into the shield healers, and we're going to start with Scholar. Again, this is a job that is shared with Summoner, so when you level Summoner, you also get Scholar. They both use a book for their weapon, and like Summoner has to summon its carbuncle, you have to summon your fairy on Scholar. The main gimmick with Scholar is that a lot of its heals and effects come from your fairy. Your fairy will passively heal people as well, which can be really nice. Scholar also has some really good movement. Its AoE is instant cast, which can be really nice for dungeon pulls. And you have your main damage spell, Broil, just like the other healers. It works identically. But that has a cast time on it. The one thing you get with Scholar that's interesting is Ruin 2, which is just a slightly weaker version of Broil, but it doesn't have a cast time, so if you ever need to move for mechanics, you can really just throw this out and keep up damage, which is really nice. The other main thing is Chain Stratagem, which is your debuff that you can put on enemies and makes them take increased crit. The other thing is your Aether Flow. So when you press this button in combat, you get 3 stacks on your gauge, and you can use these for either damage or healing abilities. Like you can spend these on Sacred Soil, which is your bubble shield that you can put down. You can spend it on Indom for a heal. Or you can be greedy and choose to spend it on energy drains to do extra damage. So Scholar gives you this interesting dynamic where you can either choose to do more damage or more heals. It's definitely the greediest of the healers in that you can try your best to get away with squeezing out as much damage as possible. That can be fun. You do have a lot of really solid tools for shielding, for mitigating. You can put out huge shields, you can ensure critical shields, and you can spread those crit shields to your party. You have other fun heals. You can increase a target's HP. There's Expedient, which is mitigation, which also provides sprint for everybody. So you get this little increased move speed as well as mit. And then you just have a bunch of big flashy fairy effects that shield and heal kind of on their own without you having to do a whole lot. Scholar is really interesting at high levels in that your fairy kind of does take care of a lot of the work, where, you know, some of the other healers need to more actively heal. Of course, you have to press all your mitigation, you have to shield when you're supposed to, but I don't know. Broil is super satisfying as well. A lot of those movement options are really fun and satisfying to use. Being able to crit shield whenever you want, at least on that cooldown, is useful. Lustrate is a good off GCD heal. It just has all the tools you could really ask for. Super powerful shielding, good damage, a good party buff. Scholar is a very solid healer that I haven't played enough of. I need to change that because this job is super fun. For me, it's a little better than White Mage. Again, all these are super close together. C tier is not a bad thing. B tier is not a bad thing. But I'm just breaking them out so you can see the order of my favorites better. But Scholar is a good middle ground for me. Shielding's super good. Damage is fun. Movement's good. The fairy helps you out a lot. And that makes it a B tier healer for me. Alright, and we've made it to the final healer and the final job in the game, and that's Sage. This is my favorite shield healer. It's got a very unique style to it with a lot of fancy, shiny, medical abilities, and the main gimmick for Sage is that you have Cardia, which is an effect that you can give to another party member, kind of like Dance Partner, but for healing, and it will passively heal them when you deal damage. So that's super handy for keeping tanks alive or for topping up other party members or yourself or whoever you want to give it to, typically the tank. But you also just have a ton of other abilities that let you, you know, pump out shields, pump out healing. A lot of it is tied to this gauge down here. These bottom ones are your Toxicon stacks, which you get when your shields break, and you can use that to have free movement on your damage spells with instant casts. Again, you need to have your shields break for that to happen, but you've got shields, you've got heals. These top resources here just kind of regen over time and are spent on your various shields, mit, and heals. A lot of them will burn through that. You can regen them with that button, Rizomata. Holos is a big shield. Lots of really flashy, shiny effects. The hardest part about Sage is just trying to discern what all of these buttons do. They all look very similar. They all have kind of similar, confusing names to them. So trying to figure that out as you go will definitely be the hardest part when you're starting out on Sage. Sage starts at level 70 anyway, so it's not a healer you're going to start with. It's pretty interesting. There is this button here called Eucrasia, which kind of puts a variation on a few of your abilities. You have your personal shield, your party shield, and your dot, as opposed to, you know, just personal heal, party heal and your damage ability. When you press Eucrasia, it swaps between the two. So you can get shields, you can get heals, or you can have your normal damage ability, or you can have your dot. You also have your Phlegma, which is a big damage ability that you can put under buffs. Panheima and Heima are big multi-shields that refresh when they break, or will heal you when they time out. So super useful stuff there. You've got Numa, which is a big laser beam and does big damage, or it does the same damage as normal, but it also puts a big heal on it. So you have a lot of good options to keep up damage on Sage. It really promotes continuing to DPS while Cardia is healing. A lot of your other abilities just promote damage upkeep as well. So Sage doesn't have a buff like Scholar, but what it lacks in the buff, it makes up for in its own personal damage. It's flashy, it's shiny. It has that futuristic doctor vibe to it, which is kind of cool. For me, Sage is one of my favorite healers. I'm going to put it in A tier. There's one thing I actually forgot to talk about with it, and that is that it is the only healer in the game that has a gap closer. So you can instantly dash to your target, whether that's an enemy or the tank or another party member. But it makes it super fun to fly around the arena, especially for a caster. You can be far away casting and just instantly fly over to the boss. That is one of the most fun things about Sage. It also has a lot of instant casts on its shields. So it's really easy to get shields out when you need to. It's easy to get damage out. It's just all around a blast to play. So there it is in A tier. That's my order for the healers, for the tanks, for the DPS, and that's about it. So that's going to do it for this one. Here's a final look at that tier list. If you made it this far into the video, you're a legend. Thank you for watching. Thanks for watching my past few videos as well. Shout out to everybody who joined the Discord. Shout out to everybody who is liking and subscribing on the videos and the channel. I really appreciate it. It means a lot. All the kind words have been awesome. I'm brand new to making these videos, so it's been a lot of fun seeing the responses from everybody, reading the comments. Let me know in the comments how wrong I am about all these jobs. The thing with this tier list is that it's really not that serious. These are just what I like to play. But all of these jobs are completely viable, completely fun options to play in the game. There's nothing wrong with any of these. Like, yeah, sure, Summoner could use a few more abilities, but like, it's still a fun job. I have fun whenever I play any of these. For me, it's just that these S tier ones are my favorite. But again, if you like more simple, easy to play jobs, just flip this list upside down. The D tier becomes S tier, and C tier becomes A tier, and so on. Like, if you like simple, easy jobs where you can turn your brain off, where you can strictly focus on learning the fights, learning how to play the game, play these easier jobs. Like, they are good. So just because I don't like them, I mean, even Summoner could be up here with these others. It's not that bad. I enjoy it to some degree. It just makes me a little sleepy, but that's besides the point. And maybe Astro is a little high there as well, but you know, this isn't perfect. Whatever job you play, you're going to have fun with in this game. If you have any questions about any of them, join the Discord. I've been playing all of these. I do mentor roulette, where I queue into a random duty in the game. It could be a dungeon, it could be a guild test, it could be an extreme trial, it could be a normal raid, whatever it is. I've been doing it where I will randomly play one of these jobs. I spin a wheel, whichever one it lands on, that's what I have to go into. So it's like super random for whatever I'm going to be doing. It's been really fun, and I'm hoping to start streaming some of that in the coming weeks. So in the description, there's going to be a link to my Twitch page. There's nothing there yet. I haven't started streaming, but drop a follow if that's something you'd be interested in. If you want to come hang out when I do start streaming, we're going to be having some fun with that, playing all these jobs. And Dawn Trail's coming out in a few months now in the summer. So all of these jobs are going to get extra buttons, reworked to some degree. They'll largely play the same, so I don't see this list changing very much, but I'll be sure to make individual updates on all these jobs as I level them, so I'm really looking forward to that as well. It's going to be a lot of fun. I appreciate everybody who subscribed to the channel. It really helps out. Thank you for watching these videos, and I will catch you in the next one. So have a good one. Peace.